For the 24th time, it's Notre Dame in Yankee Stadium this Saturday. Notre Dame, a 14-point favorite, ranked number 6 in the country. Army, number 19. These two teams have played a lot in Yankee Stadium, long, long time ago in the original Yankee Stadium. But I thought it was pretty cool that the 100-year anniversary of the Four Horsemen playing. It's the 24th time that these two teams have played in Yankee Stadium. By the way, I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of the Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated, and as always, Pete Sampson from The Athletic. Always a tricky, when Notre Dame hasn't played somebody in a while, I find it difficult to really hone in, even more so this time because Army is playing like gangbusters. They moved up to from 24th to 19th this week. Notre Dame moves up from 8th to 6th. A lot on the line for both teams this weekend in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, you did your game control story, for lack of a better term, with 600 minutes of Notre Dame dominance. I mean, that's Army too this year. Army
Yeah.
has been fantastic, maintaining control of games. It's probably something to watch for in the second quarter. See if Army can be in control at all in the second quarter, because then you wonder if it can bleed into third. I'm just intrigued at that. I should have been on this earlier, but I didn't even think about the over-under, and I saw 42. I'm like, well, I guess if it's a short game, then Army plays better defense than most teams, and Notre Dame plays great defense. You could be looking at a very low-scoring game, and it could still be one-sided in a low-scoring game. So I'm intrigued to see Notre Dame and Army drive number 3 for both teams, because I think you're either going to get into a long one, or you're going to see the talent separation for Notre Dame and Al Golden's defense settle in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a shortened game. Certainly, it will be if Army gets its way, and that's why it's critical either direction. Whether Notre Dame can get out to a quick lead and force Army out of its element, or if Army gets a quick lead and keeps itself in its element. I think that's the biggest key to the game. I just don't think that Notre Dame wants the specter of being down more than an early score, having to try and get that offense off the field. I know we've got a question about it second segment. TP, you asked Marcus Freeman an excellent question along the lines of one I also had about how important it is to get the Army offense off schedule. And if you don't get the Army offense off schedule, it's almost impossible to get the Army offense off the field.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that dovetails with like how aggressive Notre Dame wants to be offensively. Like, do you take shots in this game? Baseball stadium conditions hopefully will be good, but I would I would almost be tempted to play more of a conservative style if I was Notre Dame offensively, to avoid going 3 and out, to stay on the field, to not necessarily like limit Army's offensive possessions, but make sure yours are really good. And maybe that leads you to be a little bit more conservative if you're Notre Dame. I'll be curious to see how that shakes out.
If Notre Dame gets, let's say, 8 possessions, that's a reasonable amount. If they score 4 touchdowns on 8 of those possessions, maybe kick a field goal in there. 4 touchdowns should be enough, right? Should be enough.
Yes. Yeah,
28 is,
has been
I
every
think
game
28 will
since,
be a good winning score.
yeah, it has been every game since Caleb Williams and the end of Thanksgiving 2022. So I
There
don't
you
think
go.
Army's doing that in their 8 possessions.
Prior to our recording of this podcast, we did speak with Marcus Freeman for about 15 minutes. And Pete Sampson, one of your questions actually was about aggression, not in the same way that you were just talking about as far as possession by possession in this game. But why don't you share your thoughts on that as well as his comments?
Yeah, I mean, he said something on Monday that I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. About it was in reference to calling fake punts, and if you're not aggressive and you don't empty the tank from a playbook point of view every week, then your players are going to be like, well, then I don't need to empty the tank physically every week. Like it sets a tone, and like different coaches in different sports have sort of had different approaches on that. And it's like it's kind of one of those things, like on a message board or a podcast, we can have a debate or like holding back and like kind of saving stuff. And I think I prefer the Freeman approach of just like empty it every week and then just pick it up the next week. And he said that's sort of how you need the program to be wired every day. You communicate it, you sort of walk the walk, you talk the talk. I asked a couple players about it during the week, and yeah, they said, like, I think what Xavier Watts said was kind of like all chips on the table was maybe one of their mantras now. Defensively, that Jack Kaiser kind of leads them in that, and like I think it's the right way to do it. Because you don't know what's coming around the corner the next week.
And JB, go ahead, JB.
I was just going to say, completely agree with that, Pete. We talked about it on the pod earlier in the week. To think that they've burned plays along the way that weren't necessary to burn or whatever. I do think, and we talked about it before, Marcus is sending a message all along the way. I think Marcus sends a message when he calls late timeouts in the first half to try and get the ball back, especially if he's calling late timeouts trying to get the ball back, knowing that his offense also opens the third quarter with the ball. Again, I think that's part of his approach. That's part of his controlled aggression approach, and I think that's important. And look, Notre Dame hasn't run a 2-point play all year, so they're in the playoffs is a time you think a 2-point play might come into factor. I feel like Notre Dame's probably still got its very best 2-point play sitting in the bag somewhere. Otherwise, I like the approach of giving your opponents more and more video that they have to study every week, more and more that they have to be prepared for it. Maybe they show a look in a punt setting that ends up helping them flip the field or helps them generate a turnover because people are so preoccupied with whether or not Notre Dame might be attempting a fake punt, or maybe it's a situation where conversely, a look that Notre Dame gives at the line of scrimmage where they're maybe bluffing a punt block attempt, it gives Jordan Faison or somebody a chance to bust one long. So I just think there's a lot of nuances to it, but yeah, man, and put it all on video and give your opponents headaches.
I think they have shown so much on punt block. They're almost getting there every time the last 2 games. I wonder if opponents are looking at it wondering how we can try to hit them if they're going to keep trying to move everybody around on punt block. It's something I'm glad you brought that up, Bryce, because I forgot about this watching the game, and I saw so much movement with with Schuler and Bryce Young moving before the punt and them almost always getting there. I thought Army's going to fake a punt. And now we're on the Army podcast and we can say it. I want to see if Army fakes a punt to try to get Notre Dame off its game a little, because they're operating with impunity back there. They're running around like you're not allowed to fake punts. So I want to see if Army pulls that out. And Pete, your point about do you pull back a little bit? It is such a good point. Can you pull back and keep that aggression, though? Can you really say, we want Riley Leonard to run this ball 16 times to make sure we win? Or on 2nd and 8, can you say, no, I need to hit Bo Collins for 15 yards? It's tough for Mike Denbrock when they say, you get 25 fewer plays today. Go run the offense.
Tim, as it relates to Army faking a punt, I mean, you might as well, because obviously nobody can block Bryce Young because he comes close.
It's amazing.
So nobody's scheming against trying to block Bryce Young because he almost blocks virtually every punt that the opponent takes. Tim, I did want to, this is the week where, and now I'm seeing the term stuffs around the nation. Tim O'Malley created that term long ago.
2015, right? We got it.
Yeah. And this is where, and this leads into my question of Marcus Freeman today about, getting Army behind the chains. The stuff rate is huge. And he mentioned that you can't, first of all, I mean, part of the reason why I asked it is because Army has attempted the fewest third downs in the country. Notre Dame's actually not that far behind for different reasons. But they've attempted the fewest and they've only thrown 51 passes. So, easier said than done. But if you can get them in 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7, you've got something really, really going against the Army offense.
Especially if you get them in 4th and 6 instead of 4th and 2. I think that's where you really take control.
They haven't attempted a ton of 4th downs.
Yeah,
because they haven't had to.
They'll have to if it's 4th and 2 in this game, though. Every time, not every time, but anytime you're in mid territory. It's. I tried to go back and watch the Navy turnovers and see if Notre Dame was there to make plays on those, and as you might imagine, part of the time they were, and of course, part of the time it's subjective. I have no idea if you're going to make that play in the alley or not. It's just, I think that's the one carryover you have is, if Army is 33% as worried about Notre Dame's presence as Navy was, that benefits Notre Dame a lot. Army cannot have unforced turnovers. If Jack Kaiser rips you while you're pitching the ball, that's a true turnover you can't do anything about. Notre Dame has better players, great athletes. They cause a turnover. Navy had dumb turnovers, including on kickoffs and punts. And if the Army has any of that, this one gets away.
Well, the Army coaching staff is saying, look, I mean, maybe somewhere along the line, Navy gave the game away.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know,
I mean,
Navy
Notre Dame was
gave
going to
the
beat them
game.
anyway, but
Yeah,
Navy
right,
was just
right.
handed
Navy
them.
gave the game away. Although, you know, they've only had 2 fumbles and 1 interception. The 1 interception by Bryce Daly came in the last game against North Texas.
Pete, what
But
was your score if Navy didn't turn it over after watching the game? You're like 38-17, 30. You know, you're going to still beat them, but it's not
Yeah,
going to look crazy.
they wouldn't be under any game pressure in the
Yeah.
fourth quarter. Like that could have been a zero turnover margin game. I think Notre Dame still would have won by 21 points.
yeah, and actually some of our subscribers have brought up, or someone brought up, you know, Gino Gulli doesn't get any credit. We don't talk to him during the season. We talk to the coordinators. But I thought it was a legitimate point. You know, when guys don't play well, we blame them. When they play well, you should give them credit. And Riley Leonard's played really well. And so I asked Marcus Freeman about, you know, the importance of Gino Gulli. I thought it was a somewhat of an interesting answer because he talked about how important it was to have great communication with Mike Denbrock just in general so that he can give Riley Leonard the proper message. But also Gulli being a quarterback, you know, most of the time quarterbacks are the offensive coordinator. That's not the case with Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock, who's the tight ends coach. And so the quarterback's perspective talking to the offensive coordinator that's not the quarterback's coach is important. I thought that was pretty good feedback. And we have a question in the second segment about his name or the possibility of him going to Wisconsin because the Wisconsin offensive coordinator has been fired.
I'm going to spring one on Bryce since he talks to a lot of coaches. JB, do you have a preference from talking to coaches? Like, we always just talk about quarterbacks as offensive coordinators and stuff, but I mean, Notre Dame's had 2 good ones that weren't. Chip Long was a heck of an offensive coordinator, tight ends coach. Mike Denbrock, tight ends coach. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of quarterbacks that are good offensive coordinators, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, no, a lot of the coaches do prefer that their OC also be their quarterback's coach because they trust the consistency in messaging
Hmm.
and they want to have it more streamlined so that a lot of coaches worry about a player having too many voices in his ear, and if he's meeting with, you know, an offensive coordinator who coaches the offensive line early in the day on Monday and then meeting with his quarterback's coach later that day, they're just a little bit concerned about confusing the message. I think it's obviously different at Notre Dame because Denbrock and Gino previously worked together, and then you have a very veteran quarterback who's played a lot of football there, and Riley Leonard.
Any other comments about Army? You know, I think it's kind of been overlooked a little bit that in the last 2 games they've scored 20 and 14 points. I realized when they scored 20,
Daly.
it was without Daly, but then with Daly coming back, they only scored 14 against North Texas. I don't think that Army was as sharp as they normally have been throughout the season on offense, but North Texas held them to 14 points. Finally, Army finally trailed. Notre Dame's led for 420 minutes and trailed by 70 some. Army's only trailed by 528, which is a pretty remarkable number. But again, I think everything is always finished by saying, but look at who Army has played because they've played some very bad, especially bad offensive teams.
I thought it was pretty telling when I did Coach Monken's press conference on Tuesday, just how candid he was about it being a complete physical mismatch. And he did not shy away from it. He didn't say they've got us in some spots. He said they have us in every single spot. We don't execute perfectly. We don't have guys that can make singular plays. Whereas if they have a guy who maybe has a wrong read or keeps his eyes in the backfield too long, he can still have the athleticism to recover and make a tackle or to break up a pass if that happened to be it, or offensively to maybe miss a block, but the running back is so good he'll still outrun the defender. So I just thought it was really telling to hear Coach Monken driving home the point of the true discrepancy in size, in talent, in physical ability, all of the above. It lets you know. Sure, there's always some coach speak you have to wade through in these situations, but it lets you know how daunting he realizes this challenge. He, in matter of fact, said that this might be the most complete team he's faced in his 11 years as Army's head coach.
I think that last
Sure.
statement
Yeah,
there
yeah.
by you, John, I think is probably a fair statement about Notre Dame. I think Monken may be Look, this is a different Army team. I realize, regardless whether they're different and better and more athletic and all that, it's still not what Notre Dame has. I totally understand that. But when you watch their secondary play, they play fast. I mean, I think that their defensive backs, especially Jaden Mays and Casey Larkin, their safety, Domenico, and those guys play really, really fast. So I don't know, I understand why Monken would say that. And it's true, 99 and a half out of 100 times. I think it's a lot closer this time just because of the size and so what I just said about the secondary, but some of the size and physicality on both lines is just it's un-Army like, it's un-Navy like. Navy didn't have these kind of lines. We'll see how good Armies are, but I clearly I think they're a lot better than what Navy has.
Monken was there when they went to Oklahoma. Monken was there when they went to Michigan. And the same thing would certainly apply to those games where Oklahoma had them at every position. Michigan had them at every position. What happened in those games?
Yeah, they absolutely should have won the Michigan game.
Oklahoma won in overtime. Michigan won in overtime. So that Army has done a pretty damn good job of figuring out a way to coach around and scheme around some talent deficiencies.
That
Yeah,
was the main reason. Sorry, go ahead, JB.
I was just going to quickly say, listening to Monken this week, Pete, I was reminded of the question you asked Al Golden 10 days ago or 12 days ago, whenever it was, when you asked him about how many times do you have all 11 guys? And he just laughed. It's like, come on, professor. Listening to Monken, you get the impression that for them to be successful, they have to have all 11 guys executing. And it sounds like they get all 11 guys executing together pretty often.
I don't think he would take that question as like, is that rhetorical? Like
Right.
Monken would be like, no, that's actually what we do every day.
It looks like it. A lot of times it's definitely looked at it. Hey, wrapping up this segment, I know that we've been asked this on the message board. I just want to throw this out to everybody. Have JB, have you heard anything about tickets for,
Yes.
I'm gonna jinx it here, but have you heard anything about tickets for a potential playoff game in Notre Dame Stadium?
Yeah, and if subscribers haven't posted to the board, I'd be a little surprised because I think emails or something went out to season ticket holders on Wednesday announcing what the protocol would be for Notre Dame to host a game. And season ticket holders will get priority. And that's all season ticket holders, lower bowl, upper bowl, whatever. They will have priority for playoff tickets. The deadline, I think, is around December, maybe Friday the 13th or something like that might be the deadline to submit information or submit your request back as a season ticket holder. If you entered the Notre Dame lottery earlier in the year, you will be eligible to also enter the lottery for then CFP tickets should Notre Dame host. There will be a select number of student tickets available. Those will be at a pretty cheap rate because the NCAA mandates it. So those will be less than $30 for student tickets. And ticket rates are set by the NCAA. That's important to note. So lower bowl tickets for Notre Dame, if Notre Dame hosts a home game, will be somewhere in the $150 to $160 range. That's for lower bowl. If it's upper bowl, it's even cheaper than that. But again, those prices are set by the NCAA. If Notre Dame has to play an opening road game, you're talking about 5,000 tickets or less for the visiting team. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, the information I picked up on the ticketing prices was prime sideline 250, lower sideline 200, lower end zone 160, upper sideline 150, and upper end zone 100. So
I was going to say, I thought I saw 250 thrown out there.
That's a heck of a seat, though.
I mean, it's like it will be priced at a premium game, which it should be. So I would, and it's like the feedback that I've gotten from ticket people who want to buy these tickets is like it comes across as like you'll be able to buy multiples. That this won't be as maybe stringent as an Ohio State regular season ticketing situation.
Yeah, it's a little harder to plan for. So I think because of that, there's a belief that maybe you have 2 season tickets, but you might be able to get 4 playoff tickets. One other thing that I picked up over the last week and started hearing it last Saturday is there's an increasing likelihood or belief that Notre Dame would be in that Friday night primetime slot.
You've been on that one for a while, haven't you?
Maybe.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
There's a strong
Home or away,
strongly
you're
believe.
saying? In this case, you're saying home or away?
Well, especially home. Especially home.
Like that better than away.
There is a strong belief, if not outright desire, to have Notre Dame play a home game to kick off the first ever 12-team playoff. Heard that from some Irish Illustrated subscribers last weekend who saw me and had been in some circles that could have that and have continued to pick that up over the course of this week.
Go Wang and ESQ Clothing have shared a preview of their secret Black Friday sale exclusive to Irish Illustrated. ESQ will match percentage-wise whatever Notre Dame scores against Army on November 23rd using code Irish Illustrated. The sale will go live Sunday the 24th for 1 week, so be prepared to get gifting. Valid on online items only, not valid for gift cards. We'll be right back. Segment 2, Burning Up the Boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Our first question from Phil Fell. Army's ability to limit Notre Dame's offensive possession seems like its best path to victory. What should Notre Dame focus on defensively to ensure Army does not have long extended possessions? And also, which position group needs to play well for that to happen?
Well, it all starts at the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame's defensive line needs to control Army's offensive line, and we talked about this with Marcus Freeman today, that, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7 is your path to stopping them, because they just simply they haven't tried many third downs. But more, I'm not sure that's a big deal, but what it is a big deal is they've only thrown the ball 51 times. So it's got to be, 3rd and 3, they're still in their wheelhouse, but 3rd and 7, I think 3rd and 6 are still kind of in their wheelhouse, but you start to get into 3rd and 7 and longer. That's what you have to do. And Tim, you asked Golden about how what do you do to take them out of their game? Why don't you relate to what you talked about?
Yeah, it wasn't about Army. I veiled it with
Right.
What do you do when a team is having a successful drive? Do you have drive stoppers you go to? Because, there's drive starters for offenses. Do you have something you try to go to? And he's pretty frankly said, no, you stay within your structure. And it was Pete and I talked about, he mentioned this, we were just the two of us sitting there. He's like, if you get out of your structure and you're trying to find ways to work around your structure outside of it, it just goes off the rails. So there's no magic bullet. I think it's interesting that Donovan Heinisch had 12 snaps last time against Navy. That's all he's ever seen against this triple option. He had 1 the year before. Howard Cross did play in that game. I'm done doubting Donovan Heinisch the way he's played in the 2 games since Howard Cross went down, but this is a different look. Although if we were all to guess, would Donovan Heinisch be good against the option? You'd say yes.
You'd think he would be. Yeah, and his confidence is really high now, so I'm sure he's had a encouraging week in terms of, hey, I can do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think and Notre Dame hasn't missed a lot of tackles this season, but I think tackling well is as important Saturday probably as any game that Notre Dame has had this year. I think it's not just the front 4, it's the 7 or 8 guys that are closest to the line of scrimmage. You have to feel like you can have Christian Gray and Leonard Moore on an island and X Watts drop pretty deep and go with your other 8 closer to the line of scrimmage. I think those are all key. Here's another thing that you guys have already hit on. You've got to get them off schedule early. This is a team that averages 54 rushing attempts per game. 54 rushing attempts per game. So get them uncomfortable.
You got to figure out a way to really bring it to Bryson Daly. He's averaging 22 carries a game. I think in the North Texas game he had 36 carries. That is an insane number.
He did have 36.
How they want to beat you. It's the quarterback run. And I think you can live with maybe giving up a shot play by overcommitting to that once or twice, but you just gotta hit Daly over and over and over.
That's what I've been saying all week too, Pete. You got to beat him as badly as you can beat him. That's what you have to try to do.
I wouldn't surprise me. He's one of the few quarterbacks that, unlike Horvath, Daly will give it to Notre Dame
Yeah.
as much as he takes it.
He's
Like if you're
220. He's 221.
if you're a linebacker going at Daly and you don't like come with bad intentions, like you might be on your butt.
Yeah.
He has some Ricky Dobbs from Navy
Yes.
and Will Worth, not as big as Will Worth because he was just bigger than everybody Notre Dame tried to tackle him with, but in a different era of Notre Dame defense. But Ricky Dobbs is probably the one to go where you're like, he's going to get hit a few times and get up and be smiling at the guy that hits him. So they got to do it 36 times, not 12.
You want
Yeah, I
to,
feel like we've got a Bowen Daly meeting coming on Saturday. We're all going to be ooh. So I think that's happening.
I'm going to jump ahead, screw things up here a little bit for our producer. But Topper Lax 10 asks, is Bryson Daly the best quarterback you've seen amongst the service academies? Better than D. Dowis? I'm not sure you guys are old enough to remember
I
him.
remember D. Dowis beating Notre Dame.
Okay. Ronnie was it Makeda and Ricky Dobbs, etc. Is Bryson Daly the best of this group?
I
Got
don't
a
even
lot of
remember.
good ones.
I don't, for some reason, I remember all these option guys. I don't remember him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the name. I don't remember exactly.
Ricky Dobbs was
Ricky-
great and tough. Keenan
Reynolds. Yeah.
Keenan Reynolds is phenomenal.
really
He's
good.
one of the all-time leading scorers in college football. And Bo Morgan beat Notre Dame in South Bend. So there's another one for you. But Ricky Dobbs was the super tough guy that 2009 and 10 Notre Dame simply weren't tougher than, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They just weren't better than him. Notre Dame's defense was not tougher than Ricky Dobbs.
Yeah, for those that I'm sure it's most of the people listening don't know who D. Dowis was. He was a quarterback at Air Force when Air Force had a string of success against Jerry Faust and Notre Dame, and so that was when
4-0, right?
Yeah, that was what
Yeah.
4-0, 4-0.
So he wins no matter what. That's the
Yeah. So yeah, that was the original Notre Dame giant slayer among these quarterbacks. Not that Notre Dame has been slayed very often, but there have been some good performances. Okay, jumping back up to K Garrity 8, who are each of you picking to be your player of the game Saturday? I feel like Mitchell Evans is going to be a big time mismatch in this one. I have to admit that on another show, that was who I picked offensively for Notre Dame. I think he's a good matchup against, and I do like Army's linebackers, but I think he's a good matchup against their linebackers.
Hard for me not to pick Riley Leonard, but I think I also said earlier in the week, this is the type of game where you absolutely believe you have an incredible decisive advantage with Mitchell Evans against those linebackers. And they're good dudes, but they're not going to run with Mitchell Evans.
I'm not leaving who I did for the Navy game. Jeremiah Love is going to kill Army unless their whole plan is to stop Jeremiah Love. So Riley Leonard kills Army.
I could see a situation where Xavier Watts has 17 tackles in the game.
Oh, yeah, that's great. The Jack Kaiser Xavier Watts situation is good.
One of the two. I think they will average 15 tackles between them.
So interesting thing, because we all love. I think Adon Schuler's 10 times better than even we underrated Adon Schuler in the spring when we had to turn in our lists. But even when we knew he was going to be good in August, I think he's way better than that.
Yeah.
He actually misses a touch too many tackles. Adon Schuler. I'm going to drop one critique in. I want to see if Adon Schuler is a guy that only misses one tackle this whole game, because if that happens, that's absolutely fine. You're going to miss a tackle on 50 runs. I mean,
I think that's fair to say about him, because he is, it's not because he's passive. It's because he's very aggressive.
Yeah.
And so that's a good thing. JB, I agree with you about Bowen. I think we always have to throw out the name Jalen Sneed when you're playing option football, because he tends to be involved and played well against Navy. I mean, did some really good things. But
so you guys think maybe they could go Florida State on Jeremiah Love, where the whole point is we can't let Jeremiah Love beat us?
yeah,
and someone
maybe
else has to?
that's why I hesitate to say him, because they've been so great against the run. But I also think, there's some numbers out there about their stuff rate hasn't necessarily been great. I've got another run defense stat here. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, certainly, if you break the first wave, Jeremiah Love can hurt any defense in the country if he gets past the first wave of defenders.
Next question is from Aerofan624. This did come up on Marcus Freeman's press conference today. Freeman's name has popped up this week in NFL coaching circles. Do you buy that interest would be legitimate on both sides? JB?
I think it's a little premature for that. I think that I do think that Marcus Freeman could eventually have interest in coaching in the NFL, and big time college coaches make oodles of money, but NFL salaries have never been more than what they are right now. And you have guys making 15, 18, 20 million a year. I mean, you've got coaches in the NFL that are getting 5-year, almost $100 million deals, whereas Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley got 10-year, around $90 million deals at the college level. But I think it's premature. I don't think that his name is popping up real deep in those circles. Now, I did have an NFL assistant tell me this week that, and there's already been a couple of openings, but that there's expected to maybe be 11 or 12 NFL head coaching openings this cycle. So a third of the league. That's pretty significant. That would be the equivalent of 44 openings at the FBS level to have a third of it turnover. But I don't think it's time yet for Marcus Freeman. I know that a lot of franchises are going to younger coaches, but they're going to younger coaches that have been in the NFL. And Marcus Freeman himself noted today he's never coached in the NFL. So no, I don't think it. And the last thing, I don't think it can be lost on anyone the fact that Marcus is coming to the conclusion of year 3 in a 6-year deal.
Yep.
Coaches do not like to operate without at least 4 to 5 years moving forward. So I think when you look at the root of some of this, that would be where I start. I think I thought I saw a nod of ascension from you, Pete Sampson, but I'm not sure. You might have just been admiring your really cool Saturday 3:30 show.
I think it was a nod and a laugh. Marcus Freeman, I think, is a long way away from this. You had mentioned college head coaches don't get hired by NFL teams anymore. And if they do, they had some NFL experience along the way. Jim Harbaugh would be top of that list. Marcus Freeman is a long, long way away from that. And he's not an offensive coach either. So I don't get it at all, other than I would just say everything's a negotiation. And
everything's a story now too. I mean, it just takes one person to say it doesn't have to be validated. You can just throw out that.
Here's what I'd say. I do find it weird that the father of Notre Dame's general manager would tweet out that the Dallas Cowboys should look at Marcus Freeman as a potential head coach opening. That I find quite strange.
You guys know what the best job in sports is, right? JV knows this for a fact, so he can't answer.
Damn right. Fired SEC football coach.
Fired SEC football coach, fired NFL coach. I'd take that job in a heartbeat, come back to Notre Dame in a year and a half. No problem. There we go.
Those jobs are better than being a damn career backup. And career backups in the NFL have it made, but
everyone's a Chase Daniel in the SEC.
For that.
For the record, what Marcus Freeman actually said about it was, I thought, he deflected it really well. He talked about, glory comes, team glory creates individual glory. He said that a few times. And he also, he said it's a reflection of how the program, if there is interest, it's a reflection of how the program is producing. And then he doesn't waste any time contemplating uncertainties. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think, look, he's still learning the college game, let alone being ready to make the jump to the NFL. But if that day comes sometime, I don't think any of us would be surprised, but he's in the midst of, he's got a good chance to win 30 games in his first 3 years at Notre Dame, which is a hell of a start, especially at a place like Notre Dame.
Next question is from Philip PB 1210. I think that was an auto-generated name, but if not, you can change it anytime. Is having already played Navy helpful because the more option practice, the better? Or is it looked at as indifferent because it's 2 different types of option offenses?
It's definitely more helpful. I was talking to Golden about this on Tuesday, or some other people were asking questions about, because I said, this is more traditional triple option. He said, yes and no. But he also said, I wouldn't be truthful if I didn't admit that there are aspects of it that are like Navy. So my point being, Notre Dame plays Navy every year. Anytime you play option football, whether there are variations or not, your background in playing that type of offensive football is advantageous. And so it's similar in this situation with Army, and I think even more applicable because it is, while not entirely traditional triple option football, a heavy lean in that direction.
Yeah, when 1/6 of your schedule is against the service academies, I think you feel really good about devoting appropriate time and resources to preparing for those teams.
Question from ND_. What has enabled Army to make such a drastic turnaround from the team that just last year lost to Troy 19-0 and LSU 62-0? I don't imagine they made much use of the portal.
No, they have no portal. What it's done is last year Army tried a completely new offense, a modified spread option offense that was not at all in their roots. Jeff Monken is the second winningest coach in Army history. He's done a great job there. I think I wrote earlier this week that he now has 9 seasons, 9 of his 15 years as a head coach at Georgia Southern and Army, so not football factories. 9 of his 15 season, he's won 8 or more games. 8 of those 15, he's won 9 or more games.
Wow.
So I think Jeff Monken probably tested out last year a different offense to see, in the anticipation that it would be a big coaching cycle, tested out a different offense to try and show some people Army could do more and he could coach more. They've reverted back to their roots this year, and they're really old. So that it's not just much in the portal. They've done nothing in the portal, but they're really, really old. I think it's 17 junior and senior starters on offense and defense.
I know reading, there's a big story on The Athletic about Monken today, but the coaching staff is up front. They overcorrected to the rule change about cup locks. They thought that their offense would not work in the new rules climate of cup locks. And at the end of the season, we're like, actually, we can get back to who we were before. So they're pretty upfront. Like, I think the quote is, we overcooked it. So I think they just got back to who they are this year.
Next
Tim?
from Del Griffith.
Tim,
Go ahead, TV. Go ahead.
well,
TV.
I think there are multiple reasons why Army is where they are. Number one, they didn't schedule a damn SEC team this year, nor did they schedule a team like Troy that won 23 games in the previous 2 years. So the schedule has been more relenting. They have 8 starters back on offense, which lends itself to going back to their original style of play. And they do have a new offensive coordinator in Cody Worley, and he's done a good job. He's revived what they want to do offensively. They only have 3 starters back on defense, so give a lot of credit to Nate Woody, their defensive coordinator, for really pulling that together.
I think that's all accurate, but I also like to point out, like, last year we could have said, what's the difference between this Notre Dame team that lost last year to Stanford and Marshall and how they're 5-0 or 4-1 and almost beating Ohio State? What's the difference between this team right now and the one that lost to NIU? Stuff goes wrong in football games, man. And for Army, if stuff goes wrong, 19-0 is not that big of a deal. They couldn't lose to LSU 62-0 this year if they tried.
Yeah.
Like that absolutely would not be a thing. I like when John Bryce said it's year 10, and you guys talk about how they got away from what their foundation was in year 9. I think that is the biggest change. 62-0.
I can't believe Mike Durenbach ran up the score on the troops. It's not cool.
That was actually the hardest part of their day that time, was that 62-0 game. That made it a lot worse. There was snow.
Question from Del Griffith, 1995. If Notre Dame wins the next 2 games convincingly, do you think that will be enough for the Irish to jump Penn State, assuming that Penn State wins out, in the college football playoff rankings? Jumping Penn State would likely result in much more favorable matchups in both the first and second rounds.
I don't think they'll jump Penn State.
Probably not.
Penn State apparently has a different set of eyes with the eye test watching than my set of eyes, because
What if
it's
they,
amazing how highly rated Penn State is.
What if they need a 2-point conversion to win at Minnesota this weekend?
I mean, I go back to Bryce's point that they were handled in most of that game against Ohio State, but they're given credit for a back and forth baloney.
Yeah, it just didn't look like it.
Just didn't look, no, I don't think they'll jump Penn. Now, let's say, what about not the Minnesota game, but the last game for Penn State? If that happens, that could be a little more in your people looking at the recency bias could jump in.
I mean, there's a scenario that Penn State actually has to play in the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State. And at that point, I would think that Notre Dame would be in position to jump Penn State.
No, Oregon is clinched, so they couldn't play a rematch with Ohio State.
Oh, yeah,
Oregon
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What if they lose to Oregon?
Maryland is their 12th game, and that's at Penn State.
See, if they beat Wisconsin, and not Wisconsin. They beat Minnesota close, and then they beat Maryland on a 2-point conversion at home, and Notre Dame goes out and rips USC at the same time. Then that is the way to jump Penn State. But it's got to be. I really think human recency bias has to come in. If they beat Minnesota on a 2-point conversion and beat Maryland by 20, we're going to hear some stupid comment that night when they're doing the playoff rankings and say, "Well, Penn State looked really good rebounding against Maryland," and that's just you need to have it really, really stink for Penn State the last time the committee looks at them.
Yeah, I don't think unless Penn State loses at Minnesota that Notre Dame can jump the Nittany Lions.
We didn't have you guys on Wednesday, JB and Pete. Both of us, Tim Priester and I, were looking at you had to name an upset, like not that they're going to upset them, but we both put in the had to name an upset range. Minnesota taking out Penn State this weekend. The actual upset, Tim was just saying SMU is his actual upset pick.
Yeah, if I had to name one this weekend, it would probably be Penn State. I think that these are the games that PJ Fleck is his best when he can tell his team that absolutely nobody believes in them and only they can row the boat in the right direction and do all of this stuff.
You've been on that, you've been on that bandwagon there for Minnesota the last couple of weeks, JB, and you've convinced me. I mentioned it it's thoroughly yesterday. I'll definitely take that 12.5 at home for Minnesota.
Yes, I really think that game's coming down to not if it doesn't come down to the wire, we're going to be sitting there watching when that quarter starts and think to yourself, don't blow this, Minnesota, but then they might blow it. So that's the that's the issue. That's what I think is going to happen to the rowing boat is we're going to hope it doesn't sink, and then it does.
I have a hard time looking at Ole Miss, Florida, and not thinking like,
that's a good
that was one we talked about as well.
That's a good call.
I said it's not an upset, but Arizona State's playing BYU. It's at Arizona State. They're actually favored by 3, but I think most people at this stage, because of where BYU has been in the ratings, would look at that as an upset. Okay, question.
I want to clarify, Tim, because I don't want to speak poorly for you here. He says SMU is going to beat Miami when they play in the championship.
That's
Virginia's going to beat SMU this week.
No, I don't know.
Misspoke
SMU is going to win this weekend, but I'm on them against Miami. Question from Irish Gambler: does the CFP committee ding the Irish if this is a tight game with Army? Do you think Army would still be CFP ranked after a loss to Notre Dame?
I think if it's a Army close loss to Notre Dame, then Notre Dame would get dinged and Army would still be in the top 25. But if it's a comfortable Notre Dame win, then I don't think Notre Dame gets dinged, and I don't think maybe Army still lands 24, 25. I'm not sure. It's hard to ignore 9 consecutive wins to open the season.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll get killed for it. I think it'd be a respectable result. Like if Notre Dame goes out and wins 28-13, or they go out and win 20-13. I don't think you don't want to end up in an Ivory Covington situation at the end.
1995.
I think you want to end up at a 28-13 a lot more than you want 20-13, though. Like, an exponentially more.
20-13, Notre Dame drops. If Notre Dame wins 20-13, there's not a chance that Notre Dame is 6th in the CFP next week, in my opinion.
Especially when Penn State gets 6 first downs
Army would
and a half.
Army would still be ranked at that point when that has its own benefits. Thanks, Louisville.
We have a question from Enforcers 2117. What are your thoughts on Gino Gulli possibly leaving Notre Dame to be the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin? I asked Marcus Freeman to talk about Gulli today, but not about this specifically.
Saving my quote for later.
Yeah, yeah. Coach, is he going to leave for Wisconsin? No. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know where Luke Fickell's head is at when coaches leave. I don't think he takes it all that well, but he's in a position where the next hire he makes at OC may make or break his tenure at Wisconsin. So I think Gino Gulli is a really good coach. I think he'd be a good offensive coordinator, and he probably runs the offense that Luke Fickell would want to be run. So I think it's worth monitoring for sure.
Yeah, that's the way. I think that's the best way to assess it, Pete. It's certainly a situation that we're all aware of. It's certainly one that when I'm talking to agents and coaches around the country, I've missed a couple of calls during this podcast. It's a question I'm asking. I also think it's a great point by Pete that this really is a juncture point hire for Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. And for whatever reason, he didn't name Gino his offensive coordinator when he took the Wisconsin job. That's when he went out and went a completely different direction. So I think all of that is pertinent when you're evaluating this situation.
I think the tough thing for Gulli too is Mike Denbrock's entering year 2 next year. He's not going anywhere. As long as he's successful, he's not going anywhere for a long time after stint number 3 at Notre Dame. It's not like he's looking. Marcus Freeman goes somewhere else. Mike Denbrock's not saying, well, I have to go with Marcus. I mean, I think Mike Denbrock is pretty comfortable in this job for a bit. So that can come in, but then it comes down to Gulli choosing, does he want the Wisconsin offensive coordinator job? Or what if he develops another Notre Dame quarterback and then all of a sudden he gets offered a much better offensive coordinator job like LSU when there's a new coach there or things along those lines. And I didn't, LSU's an option because they can get a heck of a lot of quarterback and wide receiver talent in there. That's why I brought up LSU, nothing to do with Kelly.
And one other wrinkle I think to this is I thought that Cincinnati would struggle more than it has this year. And they're still not very good and they're slumping at the wrong time of the year. But I really thought that Gino Gulli and Mike Mickens, by the time the end of November rolled around, would be seen as potential head coaching candidates for Cincinnati right now. It doesn't appear that will be the case. But I would think Gino Gulli and Mike Mickens would be head coaching candidates the next time that Cincinnati opens up.
Question from Jack Mac 99, Brian Newberry, that is the Navy head coach. Brian Newberry said the moment was too big for us after Navy lost to Notre Dame. Do you believe the moment could be too big for Army?
Probably not.
I'm just so surprised it was too big for Navy. Like, I guess the undefeated part of it was what comes into play here. I guess.
Yeah,
that's a veteran Navy team. I was too.
I was surprised. I don't think it'll be too big for Army. Also, it's too windy for Navy. It's like you remember that day, like they couldn't field a damn punt. So I don't know. I would be surprised if Army would kind of fell into the Navy trap, which was shocking and a little bizarre.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if the moment's too big. Again, I'll go back to the fact that this is year 11 for Jeff Monken atop that Army program. This is an incredibly veteran team. It was year 1.5 at the point that Navy fell apart against Notre Dame.
Final question before we go to predictions is a basketball question from KJ Rice. How would you define success for Notre Dame's men's basketball in the upcoming Players Era tourney in Vegas, given the anticipated tougher level of competition? And what are your thoughts on the impact of Sir Muhammad's significant injury in terms of the team's prospects? And I guess separately, Muhammad's own development.
Yeah, I was at the game Monday night against North Dakota. Just a 17-point win. Wasn't real inspiring. We thought it'd be one of those, you can write the game story in your sleep and post it. And then Micah Shrewsbury came in to the press conference, and he was none too happy with the way that number 2, I'm trying to think, Eli, player for North Dakota, was driving the lane. And Georgetown had gotten 18 offensive rebounds on Saturday, despite Notre Dame playing really well otherwise. And then North Dakota had 14 offensive rebounds. And so he was very, very upset with the way his team played. He promised that it would be a lot different this Friday and that practices would be tougher. But anyway, my point being, next week tells us everything we need to know about Notre Dame, at least early in the season. They're in the Vegas tournament where they play, as pointed out by KJ Rice, the Players Era tournament. They play number 24 Rutgers. They play number 7 Houston. And then they play some combination of number 14 Creighton, number 23 A&M, San Diego State, or Oregon on Saturday. And then turn around, and on Tuesday they play in Athens against Georgia. And I've seen this Georgia team. They're very athletic. This is going to be really, really tough for them. What is success out of those 4 games? I think great success would be winning 2 of them, but I'm not sure how realistic that is. Maybe 1 out of 4 would be, okay, you kind of held your own. That wasn't including the Georgia game, but I threw that in there. Then as far as Sir Muhammad, I don't know that you want his development. He's a 6'6" guy. He's a point forward, big point guard. He can really distribute. He missed the last 2 games. He had knee surgery, or that's what we think that he had. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So he's going to be out. He's not out for the season. He'll probably be back in February. it hurts, but as long as you have number 3 at the point guard position, you've got your distributor, and then you also have Matt Olaco who can distribute. So I don't think it's crucial to them, but this next 10 days is going to be very, very revealing. I'm not sure how prepared they are to win more than one of those 4 games.
Yeah, I look at it, try to get a win in Las Vegas. Don't get run out by those teams to where you maybe damage the confidence that they've got growing. And then Georgia is very athletic, very athletic.
Very athletic.
There won't be much of a crowd to deal with in that Georgia game. Stegman Coliseum just doesn't get super intense unless Kentucky's in town or Auburn or Tennessee. So I think that you go to Vegas, you want to show well in all 3 games, don't get blown out, try to get a win out there, and then you got a chance, I think, a coin toss chance to go win at Georgia.
I think Georgia's not the harder test, the telling test, because it's bouncing back from some type of failure is going to happen in Vegas. I mean, it's going to be challenging. If you go and win at Georgia, come home for Syracuse, you've righted the ship. Houston is
Holy smokes.
Houston's going to teach you a lot of stuff about yourself during that one, because they are going to be up in that grill. And that's not the first word I was thinking about, but it's going to be a different world for Notre Dame in that Houston game. I know Rutgers is a quality team, but I would be very disappointed if Notre Dame doesn't play Rutgers very well.
I
mean,
agree.
Come on,
I agree
25
with
is
that
just a
one.
made-up ranking right now. They're
Yeah.
72
It's
in
based off their
KenPom.
young talent. Yeah, it's based off Rutgers' young talent.
Yeah, they have a ton of young players that tried to put. I mean, they're not really the 25th best team yet. They're not playing. I mean, there's only been 4 games, but Houston is a different world.
I would agree. Well, no, I agree. But Rutgers has been a good team here in recent years, so you're facing a winning program. But yeah, no, I think they should be able to compete with them. The key one, I guess, is on Saturday. Do you want to play number 14 Creighton? And again, Creighton's been in the middle of the pack of the rankings in recent years. A&M, we know will get after you.
Yeah, Buzz will get after Notre Dame
Yeah.
guards. He used to do that against Notre Dame guards that were awesome.
Yeah.
So he's going to be. I mean, these are really good guards,
Yeah.
but he's
And Wade Taylor is almost the Jack Kaiser of college basketball at this point. Like he's been around forever. He's year 6 or something. So
Yeah.
Wade Taylor's a pure scorer too, a volume shooter.
Okay, wrapping up. Back to football predictions, gentlemen.
Well, I've said the score a couple times on this podcast. I like Notre Dame 28-13. I don't think they're going to run away with it. I don't think that Army is going to fall into the Navy trap. But Notre Dame is just better at every position, and they're playing well and they're confident. I think Notre Dame sort of knows who they are. They know how to get the job done. So I'll go Notre Dame 28-13, and they figure out a way to at least put the clamps on Bryson Daly a little bit.
Yeah, I actually already filed mine because
here we go.
Tim O'Malley, the taskmaster, was like, "Get it to me by Thursday, you scoundrels."
I got to fly out Friday, man. I got driving half of Irish Illustrated.
You're not flying the plane, bro. 31-13 was my prediction. 31-13 Irish. I'm right there with Pete. I think a fast start is about as important as it's been for Notre Dame, because you don't want Army uncorking 14 play 75-yard drive that takes 9.5 minutes off the first quarter clock, and suddenly you start thinking, my God, we haven't touched the ball yet, and we're 10 minutes into the game.
I'm doing 31-14, but I really did not want to pick a field goal because I don't think Notre Dame will make it if it's
That's
not Mitch Jeter.
That's why I went with 28.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna stay there and say it's a 12-yard field goal or something along those lines that somehow they're allowed to kick. I'm going 31-14. I want to put down the Notre Dame cover since the spread is 14.5. So hey, 29-14. How's that? And there's no field goal, but Notre Dame goes for 2 at some point and gets it because they want to show off JB's 2-point plays for Alabama to think about when they come up here. 29-14 Notre Dame cover, and no field goal is kicked by a backup kicker because they go that way and that way when that happens too much.
Boy, that really happened last Saturday. Army actually has only attempted 5 field goals, but they've made all 5.
I want to point out Army's path to winning is unique. They have 14 picks, probably because they don't play good quarterbacks. Notre Dame doesn't either, of course. If Army can turn over Riley Leonard early where he's thinking about things, that is where I think things change. Is Army has legitimate playmaking ability in the secondary. If they get Leonard early and you make Denbrock and Leonard think a little bit about your 1st and 10 play call, that's how they stay closer.
Yeah. Well, we want to remind everybody to join us for our instant analysis from Yankee Stadium on Saturday. And until then, Tim Priester, John Bryce has exited, Tim O'Malley, Pete Sampson. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.